The first thing I remember was the silence. It was that deep, mountain kind of quiet where even the wind seems to move slow. I'd been hiking the High Ridge Loop in the Bitterroots, a route I'd done twice before. Tough, but predictable. The weather had been fickle all week. Warm sun one minute, hard sleet the next. My boots were caked with dried mud and pine needles, my shoulders sore from the climb. I wasn't out there to chase any record, just keeping a promise to myself to get through it solo once a year. There's a comfort in routine, even when that routine involves aching knees and steep switchbacks. That day I reached a narrow saddle where the trail cut between two rocky slopes. To my left, the trees opened for a view of endless ridges fading into blue haze. To my right, a patch of ground looked oddly disturbed. Freshly scraped earth, a few loose stones stacked in an uneven pattern. I figured maybe it was a spot someone had dug out to level a tent site, but something about it caught my eye. The rocks were arranged too neatly. I walked over, knelt down, brushed away a bit of dirt, and felt something solid beneath. A corner of green plastic peeked out. Curiosity got the better of me. I dug around with my hands until I uncovered a small waterproof box, one of those heavy-duty containers used for caching gear or sensitive equipment. There were initials scratched faintly into the lid, RL 2019. No lock, just a latch. I hesitated a second before flipping it open. Inside, everything was perfectly packed. Vacuum-sealed meal pouches, a roll of medical tape, batteries, a folded emergency blanket, a flare, and a little envelope with "For whoever finds this" written across it. The handwriting was careful, deliberate. I held it for a long time, just listening to the breeze hum across the ridge. When I finally opened the note, it read, "If you're reading this, you're probably tired or lost. Take what you need, but only if you need it. I was in a bad spot once and wished someone had left a cache like this. Maybe this one will help the next person." I just sat there, reading those lines over and over. My pack was heavy, my food stores low after a couple of long days. The thought of one extra meal or even those fresh batteries for my headlamp was tempting. The box seemed like it was meant to be used, and yet the words in that note carried a quiet kind of weight, like a reminder of an unspoken pact among travellers out here. I set the note down on my knee and looked out over the valley below. The clouds were building again, grey masses rolling in slow from the west. I knew what that meant. Another storm before nightfall, maybe even snow higher up. My next resupply point was still a solid 2 days away, and the last of my jerky and oats wouldn't stretch that far if the weather turned bad. The idea of borrowing just one meal pouch from that cache gnawed at me like an itch. "Take what you need," the note said, and wasn't that exactly what I needed? But the second half, "only if you need it," stuck harder. Need was a slippery thing out there. Hunger made you think you were in trouble long before you truly were. I'd been cold, wet, blistered, and tired before, and I knew I'd be all those things again. Real need was something else entirely, the kind that came with injury or a real risk of not making it out. I wasn't there yet. I picked up the box again and examined the contents more closely. Everything was sealed and organised, even labelled in small handwriting. Calories for 1 day, water treatment tabs, signal flare. Whoever RL was, they'd done this right. It wasn't just a stash. It was a small act of kindness left for strangers who might never meet. The idea of taking from it just for comfort felt like scuffing up something sacred. Still, I couldn't help imagining the possibilities. What if no one ever needed it? What if some animal tore through the seal in a few months, or a hiker stumbled on it and hauled the whole thing away out of greed? My stomach growled, reminding me that morals don't fill an empty belly. I told myself I'd only take one pouch and leave a note of my own, something explaining the choice. But even as I thought it, I knew it wasn't quite right. The cache wasn't about convenience, it was about trust. The first drops of rain hit my hat just then, light but cold. I packed the container back as carefully as I'd found it, brushed dirt over the edges, replaced the stones. I stood there for a while longer, listening to the patter of rain on my jacket, thinking about how many people had walked this trail before me and how many more would follow. I imagined one of them, limping or shivering or lost, finding that little green box like a miracle in the wilderness. That thought felt warmer than any extra meal could have made me. By the time I started down the ridge, the rain had thickened to a steady fall. The ground softened under my boots, and thunder rolled far off in the distance. I pulled up my hood, tightened my pack straps, and kept walking, lighter in spirit if not in weight. The rain followed me most of the afternoon, soft at first, then turning into a cold, needling drizzle that worked its way into every seam of my jacket. The trail wound through switchbacks thick with wet pine and slick roots. My breath came out in clouds, and with each step I thought about that box, the way it sat buried and waiting, patient as the mountains themselves. It was strange how something so small could linger in the back of your mind, whispering like a conscience. By late day, I reached an old fire ring beside a creek and decided to stop early. My hands were numb, and I needed warmth more than distance. I pitched my tent under a leaning spruce, gathered what little dry wood I could find under the branches, and coaxed a flame to life. The smell of smoke mixed with rain and pine sap, one of those scents that makes you feel both alive and small at once. As I ate the last of my oats and a handful of nuts, I caught myself staring into the fire, replaying the moment I'd closed the cache lid. There'd been something about it. A test, maybe. Not of strength or skill, but of character. Out there, you learn that every decision is magnified. No one's watching, no one's grading you, yet somehow it matters even more. The wilderness has a way of showing you who you really are when no one else can see. I thought about RL, whoever they were, and why they'd gone to such effort. Maybe they'd faced a hard moment out here, one where a single meal or bandage made all the difference. Maybe leaving that box had been their way of paying back the mountain, or fate, or whoever listens in the quiet. There was something beautiful in that. A quiet generosity meant for strangers who might never even know their name. The rain eased near dusk, leaving a low mist over the creek. Frogs started calling, and somewhere up the valley a coyote yipped once, then again. The fire's glow made the walls of my tent shimmer orange. I could have felt lonely, but instead I felt part of something, an invisible thread that tied me to every hiker who'd ever passed that ridge or might someday stumble across that same box. Before turning in, I took out my notebook, the one I always kept wrapped in a zip bag, and wrote a line on the inside cover. If you ever find something meant to save a life, let it stay for the one who truly needs it. I didn't know if it was a lesson or just a thought, but it felt right to put it down. Then I zipped the tent shut, listened to the soft drip of water off the trees, and drifted to sleep with the image of that green box still vivid in my mind, glowing faintly beneath the earth like a buried promise. Morning came, wrapped in fog. The world outside my tent was hushed and silver, every branch beaded with droplets that caught the first weak light. I crawled out, stretched stiff legs, and stood there breathing in the chill. My fire pit was a pile of damp ash, the scent of smoke faint but comforting. The creek murmured softly nearby, swollen a little from the rain. I made a quick breakfast, instant coffee, and the last of my granola, and watched the mist drift between the trees like ghosts reluctant to leave. I broke camp early, heading north along a section of trail that climbed toward Granite Pass. The air grew thinner, colder, and the trail steeper. My boots squelched in mud, and every now and then a patch of snow appeared where the sun hadn't reached yet. As I climbed, I couldn't shake a quiet restlessness, a strange pull backward toward that ridge and the cache I'd left behind. I kept wondering what kind of person RL had been, what circumstances had driven them to leave that box in such a lonely place. At one point, I stopped to catch my breath near a stand of wind-stunted pines. From there, the valley stretched below, like a faded painting. Slopes of green and grey, a ribbon of Silver Creek winding through it. I imagined RL standing in that same spot years ago, maybe looking down at the same view, deciding to hide their small offering beneath those rocks. It struck me then how rare such selfless acts were. Most of us take from the wilderness its beauty, its challenge, its silence. Few leave something behind that might one day save another. A mile or two later, I met the only other hiker I'd seen all week. He He came from the opposite direction, moving slowly with a heavy limp. His beard was crusted with frost, and one pant leg was torn at the knee. We stopped to chat, the way strangers do when meeting in a place too wild for small talk. His name was Theo from Montana. He'd slipped on ice 2 days earlier and twisted his ankle bad. Said he'd been rationing food and hadn't seen another person in nearly a week. I offered him some trail mix and a packet of soup, but he waved it off. "I'll make it," he said, though his voice sounded thin. I hesitated, thinking of the cache. It wasn't far behind us, half a day's hike at most. I told him about it, where it was buried, what it contained, even about the note inside. His eyes brightened a little at that, and he nodded slowly. "Maybe that's what it was left for," he said. We parted ways soon after, but his words stayed with me as I climbed higher into the thinning air. Maybe that was exactly how it was meant to happen, not through my hunger or convenience, but through chance and need finding each other on the trail. By the time I crested Granite Pass that afternoon, the clouds had lifted and the world opened up wide around me. Sunlight spilled across the ridges, drying the last of the rain from the pines. The air had that clean electric smell that only follows mountain storms, wet rock, cedar, and something sharp and pure. I sat on a flat boulder, dropped my pack, and just let the warmth soak into my face. For the first time in days, I felt weightless. I thought again about Theo, whether he'd turned back, whether he'd found that green box beneath the rocks. I hoped he had. It was strange how the simple act of passing on knowledge could feel like sharing a piece of something sacred. I hadn't used the cache, but maybe I'd helped fulfill its purpose anyway. Maybe RL's note had been meant for both of us. From up there, the trail wound on in thin silver lines across the slopes, paths leading toward new valleys, new chances to make choices that no one else would ever see. That's the real thing about the backcountry. It strips away the noise until all that's left is the person you are when no one's watching. Some folks think adventure is about conquering nature, but I've come to believe it's more about learning to walk alongside it with humility, respect, and an understanding that not everything out there is meant for taking. When I finally shouldered my pack again, I felt lighter than I had any right to. The mountains stretched before me, endless and familiar. I followed the trail down toward timberline, and the sound of a river began to rise, faint at first, then steady as I descended. Somewhere beyond that water would be my next camp, and maybe the chance to dry my socks in the sun for once. As dusk approached, I built a small fire by the riverbank and cooked what was left of my rice. The flames reflected in the current, flickering like a line of lanterns drifting downstream. I thought about how many quiet acts of generosity exist in the world, buried and unseen. The caches we never discover, the kindnesses we never know were meant for us. Maybe the best thing any of us can do is keep that cycle alive in our own way. Before I turned in, I added a note to my journal, dated and folded neatly in the back pocket. Someday, somewhere, I'll leave a cache of my own. Not because I needed one, but because someone else might. The river whispered through the dark. The fire sank to glowing embers, and the stars wheeled overhead like distant campfires of their own. I lay back, listening, and felt at peace, knowing that somewhere behind me, on a lonely ridge under wind and stone, a small green box still waited, steady, silent, and full of hope.